Look at the blooms on the hydrangeas. Have you noticed that all the hydrangeas are just full of flowers this spring? And when I'm talking about hydrangeas, there's many different types, but what I'm referring to are these blue mophead types, big leaf or macrophylla hydrangea that you typically see do really well down the Cape and in seashore settings. It's doing really well everywhere this year around the Boston area. Everywhere you go, you see these, and I think people are really getting excited because many recent years that we've had, it's gotten so cold and you didn't see as many blooms. So the reason you see them this year is we did have a mild winter. I think temperatures barely got down below 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you have winters like that, the old stalks maintain some life in them. And that's why you don't want to cut them back. I was out looking at the hydrangeas in our garden center in late March, early April, and I said, oh boy, we're going to have a great blooming year, because I could see little buds starting to emerge very high up on the old stalks. And you can see the new growth is coming out very high on the old stalks right here, and every shoot that comes out produces a flower. Literally, you have hundreds of flowers on the plant that might have given you 10 or 20 blooms all last year. So it's pretty exciting to see this as you drive around. Hydrangeas are our top-selling shrub because they bloom for such a long time. Many of the recent macrophylla cultivars that people have introduced have claimed to bloom really well on new growth, and the fact is most of them still bloom a lot more on the old growth. And so we get to enjoy this. I don't think I've seen this in the last 7 or 8 years, this many blooms. When you drive around and see all these beautiful big leaf hydrangeas blooming this year, they're usually blue or slightly off blue. The reason they're blue everywhere is because we have very acidic soils in New England, pH typically 5 to 5.5. And if you are from the Midwest and your pH is more alkaline, 7 to 8, you would see these same plants bloom with pink flowers. So we do have pockets of alkaline soils in Massachusetts, but 95, almost 100% tend to come up blue because we have so much widespread acidic soils around here. We do sell the aluminum sulfate or ammonium sulfate that will add some more acidity to the soils if you want to make sure you get this brilliant blue bloom with your hydrangeas. Here you see a little bit variation on the blue going more toward purple or pink. And I believe that's happening on this plant because it's closer to the foundation, which has a lot of calcium, which tends to run a higher pH. So maybe a little of that has gotten into the soils on this plant right here. The other thing I want to say about the macrophylla or the big leaf hydrangeas, the ones that are blooming so brilliantly this year, is they do like a little shade. So when it gets real hot, we just went through 3 days of above 90 degrees, you will see these leaves flop a little bit. The good news is they tend to come right back the next day, even though they look like they're dying for a short period of time. Typically, if they have west sun in the afternoon, the hotter afternoon sun, you'll see a lot of that flopping. This particular plant is actually a little bit shaded from the west, which is this way, so it faces east. And that's a good idea to plant it with more of an east-facing sun versus a west-facing sun, and they'll do better with their brilliant look when they bloom like this. So with all the brilliant blooms on the big leaf hydrangeas, like this one I think is called Twist and Shout, we would have made a big mistake if we pruned back the old growth last fall or too early in the spring. And you would have cut off a lot of the potential flowers that you see this year. So the rule of thumb is wait until at least mid-May or end of May to see how high up the old stalks are pushing out with their leafy growth, which will then subsequently turn into a lot of flowers like you see this year. And you can always scratch the old stalk, what you see right here, you could always scratch it in March, in April, and if you see green, leave it alone, don't prune it. If you see brown, keep scratching on the way down to where you start to see green, and you can prune it back to that point. But all these little nodules are going to usually indicate in March or April that there's going to be some growth pushing out, and you want to leave that alone. So rule of thumb is don't prune these large or big leaf types back until you know how far the dieback took place. Thought I'd use this opportunity just to show you the brilliance of hydrangeas. I'm at my father's house, and he's planted a lot along this southern facing slope that's kind of half shaded with these old crabapple trees. Perfect environment for most types of hydrangeas. You get the arborescens type right here, smooth hydrangea. This is a pink variety, I'm not sure which it is. Blooming like crazy this year. The arborescens types do bloom on their new growth reliably every year. And then you have a few big leaf varieties right in here. And then you transition down into the oak leaf varieties. Again, reliable bloomers. They bloom on new growth every year. So you don't always get this terrific show like you do this year with the big leaf varieties putting on such a blooming performance. But when you do, this is kind of what it looks like. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned a little about hydrangeas. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel. I'm Peter Mezitt with Weston Nurseries, signing off.